Okay, so my name's Laronie. I'm a new Salvationist, and I'm also a new Salvation Army officer. So when I say new, probably about 10 years now within the Salvation Army, but I'm only in my first year of appointment. I come from a family of 6 kids, pretty dysfunctional, and I feel very blessed that God was brought back into my life by an officer in my late 30s. The Army sent me to Hastings in Victoria. It's a new plant. I've come at the end of the planting period, so I'm their first officer. It's a very different expression of the Army. We're a mission centre, we're not a corps. It confuses a few people because they keep wanting to call me a corps. And when I say, no, we're a mission centre, they go, what is that? So yeah, it's interesting. We had an established worship time and day, but God had said, just go out, meet people, go out and see. So I spent my first 6 months pretty much learning who was in our community and where we fitted in amongst that, and where God was actually already doing his work and whether we were connected into that. Yeah, see, I love the retrospective view of God. So I worked for the Army for 10 years in the territorial headquarters, and I saw the majority of employees. So it was very rare for me to actually see the church aspect of the Army. I saw all the social services and the employees and everyone else, and for me they were doing God's work. Now at the time I would not have seen it in that way. I saw it as people doing the work that they were employed to do. When I came back to my faith, I realised, yeah, they were doing that, but they were doing it because God had placed them there. So for me, it was quite easy to say, well, God works through others. You know, it's not necessarily about the church and the officer. It was actually about God placing it in other people's lives and their hearts to do his work. And it was opening your eyes to go, there are others who are doing that already. Initially, there were some that after discussion with the Divisional Commanders, they were okay to let go of that. When I explained how God had placed ministry on my heart and how that ministry looked, they were very happy to support me in that. They were happy to sit back and allow me to show them what that looked like. At that stage, I didn't know. I didn't know what it looked like because I didn't know the community. I just said to them, I knew it wasn't, a Sunday service. I know that God wasn't calling me to stand up and preach and that be my one and only ministry. He was calling me to live my life with others. So I couldn't explain what that was until I got there. And I was very fortunate that my divisional commanders had faith that God was going to do what he needed to do through me. It was really interesting that the first year was quite challenging. There were things that I knew weren't the way God would have liked them to be, and God had placed it on my heart that I had to deal with that, even though I didn't want to. I wanted to leave that and let someone else deal with it. But I had to deal with that straight away. But also he opened doors very quickly for me. So while it was intentional for me not to do anything for the first 6 months, but to get to know the community, God said, no, I actually want you to do some things. He put me into places. We run a Sunday barbecue. I had no intentions of ever doing a Sunday barbecue. Hadn't even entered my mind. My first week in my appointment, I was invited to a meeting with some residents within the area, and they were talking about a particular park that was being used for drug dealers and for people drinking alcohol at night. It was quite disruptive. The kids weren't using the park and they wanted to take it back. And then in that meeting, God just said, tell them you'll do a barbecue. So I did. I just blurted out. I had no resources. I had no idea how I was going to do this. And I just went, I'll do a barbecue. And the following fortnight we started. I was given money. It came out from another community source. There was no advertisement of this barbecue. I just showed up on that Sunday, started to cook, and people came. And we now feed anywhere between 40 and 50 people on a Sunday at the barbecue. And we're taking back that park. The drug dealers were upset by that. They challenged us a bit, but they no longer deal drugs there. Physically came up to me. So it was my first Sunday in the park, and where I was cooking directly opposite, the dealers could see me. And that was where they did their work. I didn't know that at the time. And they just came over and said, you have to leave. And I said, well, I'm not leaving. And we had a bit of a discussion around what that meant. And I just said to him, look, I'm here and I'm going to be here and I'm going to come back every second week. And since then, they've no longer had any input and no longer coming into the park. And some of the kids that they were using to help deal the drugs now come and actually have a feed and a chat. So it was good. We've been so blessed. A lot of the younger children who come, they want to clean. So the first week I was there, I took a broom and a dustpan to pick up the broken glass from the beer bottles and stuff like that. And they came and asked me, they said, "Why are you doing this? Why are you cleaning up the park?" And I said, "Because it's the right thing to do." I said, God tells us to, look after each other. And they go, "Yeah, but so what?" I said, "Well, it's so that you can use the park." And the kids kind of went, "Oh, I get that." One particular weekend we had one of the young boys come up and he was like, well, because they knew I was the minister, and he turned around and he said, "Oh, if I had a car, I'd go to church." I said to him, "It's okay, because when you're here, you're being the church." And his face just lit up. He had this really massive big smile and he couldn't stop smiling. And every person he met that Sunday, he's going, "I'm being the church." And then he went into his school, because we're right beside the school, and he told the principal that, on a Sunday he's being the church. He's not going to church, he's being the church. And that got spread around, and then all of a sudden his mates were showing up because they wanted to help cook to be the church. So we went from, this one discussion with this one young boy to, I have 5 of them who want to come and cook. And now I've got the girls who want to come and cook because the boys are doing it and they want to be the church. And there are multiple stories where we've connected. I've got a gentleman who was an alcoholic. He's now stopped drinking. He's come to help with our garden. His wife and the children are connected through the barbecue, and that's how I connected into him. He's now leading and looking after my volunteers in my garden that help others to feed them with the vegetables that come from it. We've just started Junior Soldiers. That's from children from the barbecue. I ran a school program just recently, 21 children over the week, all from that community, from that barbecue. We ran a Christmas holiday program, a Christmas party, and that was about 400 people from that community. And pretty much every family there knew me because their children came to the barbecue. So I hadn't met the parents yet, but I knew the kids. And then the parents were coming up and giving me hugs going, "Thank you." And I'm like, "Who are you? What did I do?" And it was like their kids were coming and sharing with them about what we were talking about at the barbecue. But the biggest one for me, the first week we started the barbecue, the first day I was there, I'd just started to unpack and get stuff ready, and the local takeaway shop owner came in. And she came to me and she goes, "I don't understand why you're doing this." Now, she's from China. She's not of faith. She told me straight out she doesn't believe in God. God just wasn't on her radar. And she goes, "I don't understand why you're doing this for. What do you get out of it?" And I said, "Well, nothing." I said, "It's about bringing community together and uniting and helping each other." And she goes, "But why?" And I said, "Well, because God actually calls us to do that. He wants us to do this." And she goes, "Well, tell me about your God." So we spent 2 hours talking about God. Just recently at Christmas time, her parents flew over from China, and her dad and her mum had to come and meet me. They don't speak English, so she had to translate, because they also want to know, why am I in this park feeding people? Why does my God call us to do that? And they didn't understand. So we had this massive discussion, and then I had young kids telling her what to tell the parents about God. So, it started with me talking, and then it was the kids telling the parents, and it was just such a lovely experience. So, yeah, there's so many aspects that have changed because of that barbecue and God putting us in that space. So we also have families who now come, and it really pleases my heart to see where the parents are actually engaging with the other parents and helping them. Recently we had a young mum who'd come in. She's now moving back home with her mum. She's having some difficulty with her kids. And the other parents offered time, and said, "Well, I can help look after so-and-so while you do this." And it was just lovely to see that they were now connecting with each other and saying, "You know what, I can help you with that bit. And you're not alone, and we're here together." So, yeah, they're definitely empowering each other. It's wonderful to see. It's quite challenging, actually. It's the obedience side is the easy bit when everything is going well. It's actually quite challenging when you're going to have a tough discussion with someone, or you're going to have to, sit down and deal with an issue that isn't so pleasant. I wanted to avoid it. I didn't want to deal with it. But then I was reminded, God kept saying to me, there's nothing that's going to happen today that you and I can't do together. and he kept putting that on me, and I'm going, okay, I'm going to have to do this. And so I'd sit down with people and have those discussions, and why they were hard discussions, when they're done with love, they're good discussions. And yes, some of the outcomes were some changes and some people moving and leaving, but some of those people have now come back, so it's opened doors. I've had to have the tough discussion with one group of people, but then I've had kids being given opportunity to stand up because of that, or people who were less empowered have turned around and said, this is now a safe space and I can actually speak my mind. So it is tough. You do need to be obedient, because I could have easily turned away and ignored it. But by doing that, I believe that I was dishonouring God and what he had planned for others, because it opened pathways for them into roles and into leadership that I don't believe they would have had if I had been disobedient. And it would have been easier for me. I could have been disobedient. I could have left it for someone else to deal with, and that was very appealing. God was not letting go on it, and he kept presenting it and saying, you have to deal with this, you have to deal with it. But it opened a lot more, and people are more engaged and more happy to be engaged, knowing that if stuff isn't right, it will be dealt with. So it has empowered others to know that they can come into a safe environment. Isn't it interesting? Someone said to me once, it's really hard to make disciples, and I felt really awful because I laughed. And then I realised I probably shouldn't have laughed. But it's not that difficult, because we all have the things that God has already given to us. You don't have to be an outspoken person. You don't have to be, the centre of attention. You don't have to be, the strongest preacher. But God's given us all a gift. And it's actually connecting that gift with other people of that gift and asking them then to connect with their people. So it actually isn't difficult at all. The example, I suppose, the easiest one I can give is when I started at my new appointment. The first week, you're meant to unpack. Well, my first week, I just walked up and down the street and met the business owners. I just went in and said, hi, I'm Laronie, I'm going to be here soon. And that was it. And then a couple of weeks into my appointment, and I went down to do some shopping for church, and one of the business owners went, oh, hi, Laronie. No, for the life of me, I couldn't remember her name. But she remembered me and what we did, and turned around and said, I'd like to help you. It was minimal effort. But she is a person who God has placed deliberately, I believe, in that space to help us. She now talks about what we do. I didn't ask her to, but God has placed that on her. So for me, I'd like to say to people, don't forget, it's God. We're just his tool. If we just be who God made us to be, he'll do his bit, and he'll make them respond in the way they're meant to be. So yeah, just go out and talk and be you, because God will connect you to the right people. Be open to it. And it always makes me smile. I actually shared this recently with my youth. So we're starting a youth group at the end of this month. And again, it's the guys from the barbecue. And we were talking about, and I said, guys, it's really, really great that we want to get together now and connect and grow each other. I said, but you know what? You still need to go out and do your stuff. And they were like, what? I said, well, think about Jesus. What did he do in his ministry? He could have easily stayed in Jerusalem and built the temple and said to people, come in and hear me talk. But he didn't. He said, go to town, meet the people, sit with them, eat with them, enjoy their company. And if all is good, then things will grow and happen. And if they're not, it's okay. Don't get disheartened, just shake it off and keep going. And there's lots of times you have to shake it off. It's not always get the perfect answer and you're on your way. But it's knowing when to shake it off and keep going. So you do get prompting from God. You do feel it in your heart that, maybe this isn't of God, and maybe I just need to move on here. And then when God's ready and when that seed is ready to grow, it'll come back. Maybe in your time, maybe in someone else's time, but that's okay. But you have to go out. You have to be out, because no one is going to knock on our door. So unless we're in that space living with them, how do we get to them? It's a priesthood of all believers. It's not, here's the officer and that's the only person who's going to minister to you and create disciples. I'll be honest, I can't disciple a 15-year-old youth. However, my youth can. That they disciple others. There are people who are connected now to my mission centre that they go, how did they come in here? And then I find out they were discipled. They were connected from other people. So just recently we had our worship space painted. The gentleman who did the painting connected us into Corrections Victoria. Through that I had a 2-hour discussion around how to forgive people with these guys who'd just come out of jail and were doing parole work painting my mission centre. Through that, one of the guys gave me his sister's number and said, I want you to ring my sister, I want her to come here. Now, I grabbed the number and I wrote it down, and unbeknownst to me, he rang her that afternoon and said, you're to go down there. You're to go down and you're to help. Now, I remembered he'd put the number in the phone and I'd written it down and hadn't had time to get back, and it wasn't until a couple of weeks later this lady shows up and goes, I want to help cook for you. I'm a professional chef, I love to cook, I want to come and do it. And then we sat down, we had a chat and finally connected back. That was through that guy who did the painting, who came through another guy who was connected through to another guy, So, yes, we're not the ones to disciple everyone. And I think if you think like that, you need to stop and just ask God for some prompting. Because, yes, spiritually we can guide people, but God even had his 12, It's not just us. Yeah. God's there. I know I heard often at college, God goes before you, will come after you, and he'll be there forever. And while you hear those words, sometimes they just kind of go over your head. But even on your worst day, you'll see God there. You just got to be out there and willing to look at the least likely. Because it's not always the other pastor or the other church that's doing the work. Sometimes it's the local fish and chip shop owner who's, connecting with the kids, and then through that you can connect and build up those kids in a different way that God made them to be. So open your eyes to the obscure, open your heart and your eyes to God.